Good evening, everybody. It is Thursday evening, and I am coming to you from my basement. And I have to apologize for my sort of disheveled appearance this evening. It has been a long, hot, busy day, and I feel like almost nothing has gone to plan. But I'm here, I'm with you, and I hope that you're with me. I'm going to be guiding us through our online Bible study this week. So very grateful to those of you who can join me when you do. Appreciate that, and I hope I do you a good service this week. So our scripture reading is in Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 15. I'm going to give you just a few moments to find that in your Bibles, or if you're using the app, like the YouVersion app or another Bible app, to get over there. Okay, so I'm going to read Genesis 45, verses 1 through 15. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near. And he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father, and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children's children, and your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt, and of all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him. I'm going to ask the blessing on the scripture, and then we will proceed with the Bible study itself. Almighty, all-wise God, we humble ourselves before you one more time on this side of eternity, to ask you for your guidance through your word as we study your holy scriptures and the story of Joseph and the salvation that you provided him, the rescue and the path that you provided him in his circumstances. We ask, God Almighty, that you give us receptive hearts, minds, and spirits, that we might derive from your word, from your plan for us this evening, what you have prepared for us to hear, and that we might utilize that and employ your words, your message, in our lives and affected in the world around us, so that we might be the difference to those with whom we come into contact. Guide us as we study your word. Give us your counsel. Teach us to hear you through godly wisdom. We love you, praise you, and thank you, and ask all these things in the beloved name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So, the title of the lesson is Joseph's Providence. The central question that the literature proposes is, how can I learn to see God in my circumstance? So with that in mind, I want to give you a few minutes for you to think about how God has worked in your life in unexpected ways. So for instance, consider a time that you felt your life derailed, but God set you back on track, or maybe just rerouted the tracks. Okay, keep that in mind throughout the course of our study. So we will return to it here and there, but I want it to be sort of a driving force of thought, a focal point, as we go through portions of the lesson. So the question I have is, do you think that Joseph planned for his life to take the trajectory it did? I think that we probably all can agree that if Joseph were to design his life, if he were given the option, right, how do you want your life to look, it wouldn't include being bullied by his brothers, completely tormented and terrorized by his brothers, and then sold into slavery. Good things came of it, and we'll get to that. But I'm sure if he were to write out a blueprint of his life, it wouldn't look anything like that. Nor would any of us prepare our own lives in that similar fashion. We just wouldn't. But I want to extend that to God. And maybe God never intended for Joseph's life to go that direction either. I'll clarify that in a few minutes. But for now, look at the long, convoluted path that Joseph's life took to deliver him to his purposed destination. So now think back to the example that came to mind when I prompted you a few moments ago. Is there a parallel between that example from your life and Joseph's life? Can you relate to Joseph's trajectory based on personal circumstances? So let's dive a little deeper. Did God design Joseph's life to follow the course it did? Take a few moments and think through that. Yes, I realize it's a loaded question for multiple reasons, and I'll get into that in a few moments. But I want to take us back to this verse, a couple verses. Let's start at verse 7. Verse 7. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you, his brothers, who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. So we can look at that and we can infer from that scripture a couple of things. First, what it says on this, at this most superficial level, right? Line for line, God sent me here. So we could look at that and say, well, why would God put Joseph through all of that, right? God's plan, God's design wasn't necessarily all of the turbulence that Joseph experienced at the hands of his brothers. God's plan for Joseph was Egypt, right? To save his family from famine. I mean, effectively. It could have gone a lot differently, right? But it didn't. That's the way that it went, and God made the best of that circumstance. He utilized that circumstance through Joseph and in Joseph's life to create or to design, to reorient the outcome. Okay, so why is that a loaded question, right? Let's go back. Did God design Joseph's life to follow the course it did? So we kind of touched on it. Why is it so loaded, though? First, it suggests, like we read, that humans have little to no control over our individual lives, and that we're prescribed before birth to a specific trajectory. Now, that's fairly straightforward, and I believe that we can agree that that concept is absurdly rhetorical. Second, and maybe a little more complexly, it implies that we might serve a somewhat sadistic God. And I know what you're thinking, Jared, what do you mean? But we know, or as Christians, I believe we should know, that God doesn't want us to suffer. We can collectively agree on that. Is there suffering? Sure. Is it necessarily God's grand design? No. And we understand that, and we accept that. Our suffering is self-inflicted, and we comprehend that and how we can avoid that, and maybe prevent it, and we're just incapable. So it would be easier, right, if our lives were just simple and linear, straightforward, no hiccups, right, no valleys, just all highs, all mountains. But whose fault is it that our lives are not entirely linear? They're not so simple as start to finish, and no speed bumps, no obstacles, no tumult, from point to point. Yeah, it's ours. God doesn't create the turbulence in our lives. Obviously, we do. We, as humans, even as Christians, problematize everything we can at every possible juncture because, well, we're humans, and we can, I guess. I don't have a simpler explanation, and I don't think we need one, except just that. We're humans, and we've been making a mess of things since, maybe not day one, but right, pretty close to it. The God we serve, though, thankfully, guides us through all of that turbulence, the turbulence that we manufacture in our own lives, and provides us with an escape route. And that's not something that we accomplish of our own volition. So let's look to another example, Jonah. I'm not going to go through it. We all know the story of Jonah. But just like Joseph, there's a parallel. what God's design for Joseph was to go here, right? Or for Jonah, excuse me. God's design for Jonah, just like Joseph, was to go here, right? But Jonah says, no, my design for my life is to go here. Literally the opposite direction, literally and figuratively. He not only ran from a physical, geographical location to which God had called him, he figuratively was running from God. Now, we're not delusional. We know we can't literally run from an omniscient being, our almighty, all-wise God. But maybe we are a little delusional, because I think in certain moments as humans, even as Christians, we think we can run from God, and it's ludicrous, but we still do it time and time and time again. So Jonah runs the opposite direction as fast, as hard as he can. So what does God do? He redirects his path. Would it not have been just so much simpler for Jonah to go in the direction, the route to which God had called him? Absolutely. He wouldn't have spent 3 days in the belly of a fish, a whale, what have you. And certainly that was never part of Jonah's plan. But Jonah's plan, because it didn't align with God's plan for his life, completely derailed him, diverted him. And as a consequence, he spent 3 days in the belly of a fish until he finally capitulated to God's calling, right? To what God had commissioned him to do, to accomplish. And we can see that similarity in Joseph. Now, Joseph wasn't running from God, but just like we read what Joseph is saying here in verse 8, so it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. He's telling his brothers, first of all, don't be sorry, right? I mean, the manner in which Joseph arrived in Egypt may not have been, probably was not the plan, but God utilized that circumstance that man created, that Joseph's brothers created for Joseph, to capitalize on the circumstance, the situation that man manufactured. And we can come back to it. Our design, our intentions for our lives are ultimately inconsequential. So I want to share a secondary account with you. I had the opportunity this week, a couple of different times, to talk to some people, and I'm not going to give names or anything, but I talked with somebody this week that I feel like God has determinedly put in my life at a time when I need it the most. And this individual was sharing with me something kind of similar, maybe not to the extreme of like Jonah and Joseph, right? But this individual does mission work afield or abroad, right? And how this person got introduced to this kind of mission work, to the mission, the ministry that they uphold, was not by their design. So they went into this thing basically as an assistant, so to speak. And there was a leader of this mission, this constructed mission, and all of a sudden, and this person was, pretty much guaranteed. You're just assisting. You don't have to coordinate anything. You don't have to, do all the major difficult legwork, the logistics, and all of that. You don't have to plan the mission work while we're abroad. You're really just there to help, to facilitate, to make sure things run smoothly. Leading up to the event, and this would be the first mission that this person ever participated in, and leading up to day of departure, the individual who was the leader of this mission retires, right? Or steps aside. I don't remember the exact detail, but was no longer involved. So suddenly all of the responsibility falls on the assistant, the person who's not supposed to be responsible for the entire project, and is just thrust into this foreign mission field unexpectedly, unprepared, so to speak. And what they didn't realize, probably in the moment, is that God had prepared them for that moment. And 20 years later, because this was in the late 90s, 20 plus years later, this individual has a burgeoning mission project, mission responsibility in a foreign country, literally on the other side of the planet. And I'm sure that person would tell you, this wasn't the design I had for my life. But again, our designs are immaterial. And we see that with Joseph. We see that with Jonah. We see that with Paul, right? In the New Testament. We see that in our lives, in our own individual lives, every day. I believe that wholeheartedly. But God is bigger than that, right? And and that's the Sunday school, that's the Bible school answer, I know. Response to those circumstances and the way they play out, but it's no less real, and it's no less the reality. So then finally, why is this question so loaded? Revisiting the question, did God design Joseph's life to follow the course it did? And any one of us can fill in our own names, replace Joseph's name with our own. Did God design Jared's life to follow the course that it did? Probably not. And I've made a mess of things, I promise. So finally, not only does the question indicate God predetermines every aspect of our lives down to the minutia, it further suggests that our decisions are not really our own, and we're ultimately conceding to the will of a quote-unquote puppet master. Now, again, that's rhetorical, and it's absurd, and you know that I'm not being serious. And let me be clear, I don't believe any of the notions that I've sardonically proposed here. I just want to make a point, and I think that you get it. God absolutely doesn't map out every aspect of our lives from birth to death. We're given millions of choices throughout the course of our lives, millions of opportunities to choose the right path. And I'd venture to say that more often than not, we choose incorrectly. But we see countless examples in the Word about individuals who chose wrongly, and God redirected them in a manner that allowed them to best heed the call of God. And again, like Joseph, and it wasn't by per Joseph's choice, but his brothers, right? And God still utilized that, and I think they were eventually able to see it as well. But Saul, Paul, Jonah, again, we can reiterate these again and again, and I won't recapitulate them because we're all familiar with all of those stories. But so I deliberately slow walked us through all of that to ultimately arrive at this destination, which is an important discussion about God's provision in our lives, regardless of the circumstances. We create for ourselves. So frequently we create for ourselves. So again, let's consider the central question. How can I learn to see God in my circumstance? And I would amend that question to ask, how can I learn to see God in the circumstance I've created in my life? Which brings me to this. What is providence? So the title of the lesson is Joseph's Providence. Providence is defined as protection. More specifically, it's a promise of protection. Even more focused, specific to our faith as Christians, it's a promise, or rather, it's God's promise of divine protection, which is exactly what Joseph received, right? Things could have gone sideways, and they did to a certain degree, but they could have been so much worse than they were. And Joseph could have had a really negative approach or attitude or perspective of things that happened, but he was able to step back and look at things objectively, look at things, through a godly lens and say, this is God's will. Maybe not the route that I had to take to get here, but the being here, the being present in this moment. This is the work of God. So occasionally, and I would say frequently for some of us, we unexpectedly find ourselves walking down a winding, dark, unrelenting path that we probably would never have chosen if someone had apprised us of the outcome. So if I could tell you, if you make this decision, this is what's going to happen, right? And God could guide us, direct us that way, right? Jared, if you make this decision, this is what's going to happen, right? You can navigate it and come out of it pretty clean on the other side, but you're going to hurt, for the next few weeks, few months, few years, however long. And it's going to be a lot more arduous than if you just tell me yes right now, right? If you just listen to me right now, I'm going to make this easy for you, or a lot easier than it otherwise would be. So I think somewhere in there, just like Joseph, that we can see God's sanctity and God's mercy and grace. We might have to squint, cock our heads to the side a little bit, right, to really see it, because we have such a myopic view of our lives around us. But it's there, and really you don't have to squint that hard. God's pretty obvious about a lot of things sometimes. But I want to repeat this little bit because I think it bears repeating. We're allowed to choose for ourselves daily the paths we walk. Sometimes we stray because we ignore God's urge in one direction or another, like Jonah. Go this way, Jonah. I think I'll go this way. And we'll get eaten by a fish, right? Or whatever, figurative language you want to use to fill in the blank. Sometimes we wander astray because we convince ourselves that we're listening to God's will for our lives, at least in that moment, right? When, if we actually admit to ourselves, I think if we're honest with ourselves, that we actually heard what we wanted so we could go the direction we want, right? At that particular point in our lives. And of course, there are instances in which I believe we genuinely believe in the moment we're earnestly seeking God's guidance. And it's not until we feel lost that we recognize we misstepped, right? Or we turned right when we should have turned left. Or, the big broad path, the wide, well-lit path. Although it looked easier, it was also easier to straggle, right? And maybe that's because we didn't spend enough time in prayer or in study, or maybe we didn't listen closely enough, or maybe we just ignored the instruction because that's not what I want, and that sounds really hard, and I don't want to do that. I'm just not interested in working that hard right now. Or this is a common one, and I'm probably more guilty about this than anybody else, but you're welcome to supplant me for the right to this claim. It's not my calling, right? That's not my ministry. I don't feel called to that ministry. And maybe that's true, but we have to ask ourselves, is that the reality, or is that just my excuse? It doesn't matter for two reasons. First, we can't change the past. We can only learn from experience and improve upon previous failures in future decisions. I bet Jonah was pretty rigorous, pretty rigid in how he followed God from that point forward, right? We get a glimpse, into it. Not a lot. Paul, right? We know the story. Number two, God already forgave us. That's the providence, the promise, right? And God is prepared to right our ship if we're receptive to it. But we're not forced, and we need to understand that. We need to reconcile that with our faith, with our calling, right now in this moment, or choose a moment. But all of this, it demands some effort from us, from you, from me. So what does providence have to do with all of this? Providence assures us that no matter how far we wander or for how long, as Christians, we'll never fully escape God's love and protection. Does that mean we're invincible? No, of course not. It means that we can create messes of our lives again and again and again and again and again and again. You get it. But God never forgets the providence promised to us. As Christians, we're saved, we're forgiven, we're protected. All we have to do is say yes.